What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Venice Antoinette,
and Amber Monique,
here with another episode of
Sip and Spill.
And on this show, we sip on drinks while spilling the tea on dating and relationships. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure you follow us on social media at sipandspills. That's at SIPANDSPILLS across all social media. Now, let's get started.
24 seconds and you better not stop. You got 24 seconds, can't you beat the shot clock? What you waiting for, little daddy? I ain't got that much time. You seem anxious, you seem adamant, but you ain't pressed my line. Wondering why? No, you ain't shy. I'ma say bye.
All right.
All right, boom. Amber, what are we talking about today?
So today we're talking about a topic that Derrick Jaxn has inspired. I'm sure a lot of you have seen his viral videos on Facebook, and it's basically empaths and relationships. And I guess to start off, we can define an empath, and it is a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. So basically, it's like if you hear another person's problems, you feel like it's yours to fix, essentially. And
basically.
And Derrick Jaxn is saying, basically people that get in relationships with people that have a lot of baggage, and the baggage starts bringing them down. He's basically saying that's not a good thing. And the way that a person should bring you their problems shouldn't be in a way that you have to take on the load. Vinny's, what's your what's your take on what he has to say about it?
Right. For one, I definitely want to insert a clip of his definition here, just because his definition is a little different, and he says it at the beginning of his video.
Team Jackson, what's happening? So I've been getting a lot of messages lately from women that are asking me, like, should I date a guy that's dealing with this, dealing with that, financial issues, multiple baby mamas, or he was hurt whenever he was younger, bad childhood, etc., etc. And what I've noticed through these conversations with these women is that they tend to be what's considered an empath. An empath is somebody who's not just a nurturer, because y'all are that by nature, but an empath is somebody who takes on the mental or emotional state of another person who's going through a storm, dealing with life, dealing with baggage. It's like it's difficult for an empath to see a homeless person without wanting to give everything they got in their pocket. It's difficult for an empath to see something on the news like a school shooting or something tragic without it messing up their whole week. Like, that's what an empath is.
But what I took away from his video was more so of him saying, like, as an empath, you need to be careful with the type of energy you allow around you, because other people's emotions and other people's feelings you can personally feel and take on. Like he was saying, how like an empath, for example, has difficulty walking past a homeless person because they can feel that hurt and that pain. And I agree. And the other thing too, because if you're a Derrick Jaxn fan, you know that he's touched on empaths a lot through his narcissistic series, where he talks about like dealing with men that are narcissistic and how they like to feed on empaths. And that is so true, because when you're narcissistic and your only concern is yourself, you know that an empath is going to take on your issues even more than probably you'll take on your own issues. And so as an empath, you have to basically just make sure that you put up boundaries and protect yourself, because you know that you can't control necessarily how you feel towards other people's problems and feel towards other people's mental and emotional issues, but you can control how you react to them.
That's so true. And he was saying, like, basically, everybody's always going to have some type of problems. Like, no one's a perfect person, but he was saying if a person really loves you, they're not going to bring you their stuff in a way that you need to take it on. Like, they're not going to bring you their baggage in a way that will weigh you down, which made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess the first, like, one thing though that like triggers me with this empath conversation is that I think a lot of people define themselves as empaths who are not. They just feel like, oh well, like I don't know. I feel like there's a difference between being empathetic and being an empath because, being empathetic is an adjective, whereas when you're an empath, that's actually who you are as a being.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me personally, I think that I'm very empathetic, especially when it comes to relationships, but I wouldn't define myself necessarily as an empath because, like, prime example, if I walk past a homeless person, I'm not going to immediately want to cry. So in that sense, I'm not, but like in the sense of if I'm dealing with somebody or dating someone or I'm loving someone, I take on their emotions and their mental and their feelings and their problems as my own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think in relationships, I'm an empath, I guess, or empathetic. I don't know. I don't really
Yeah.
understand. Like, I'm still kind of on the fence of what's defined as that and what's not, because I think a lot of people like to just use that term when it doesn't fit a lot of people. Because even when you really look into it, it even says it's very rare for somebody to be an empath. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's true. Like in the definition I read, they called it like paranormal, which I don't know if it necessarily has to be that, but yeah, it's like insinuating that it's not like a common thing because it is
Mm-hmm.
normal to feel bad for people when people have problems. But I agree with what you're saying. Empath means you feel like it's your problem to fix,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I can be that way with like people that I know, and
Mm-hmm.
even with people I don't. I'm empathetic, but if someone I know tells me that they have a problem, I do tend to feel like, all right, like let me think of a way I do tend to like take it on that way. And I think it's important to be aware of that though, because people may not even be expecting that of you. Maybe they just want to
Yeah.
talk to somebody and then you
No,
feel
that's
like,
true.
oh God, like I've got to figure out a way to like fix this for them, or like how are we going to get out of this? And people may not even be holding that expectation of you.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, because I think both of us are similar, especially when it comes to like the people we love, like our close friends, family, and such, in
Hmm.
the sense of we take on their issues as our own. So, speaking strictly in relationships, do you think we set ourselves up for failure by doing that?
100%. And I can even say for myself, like once I hear about somebody's problems with someone I may not even be like serious with, but I find myself that will make me kind of even get more like wrapped up into that person. Now that I'm older, I can recognize
Mm.
that trait and be a little more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like before it'd be like, oh, he has this, like, but I can help him, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can definitely say I've like fallen victim to that. What about you?
No, I definitely have. If I've even with like a prime example would be like my most recent ex. Even though
Uh-huh.
we've been broken up for almost 2 years now,
Yeah.
he resurfaced into my life temporarily, and I do define my ex as narcissistic. Like, he's very selfish, he's self-centered, and he's not afraid to admit it.
Uh-huh.
And I think that when he resurfaced my life, it was because he was dealing with a lot and going through a lot, and he
Yeah.
knew, because of who I am, that I would take on his issues as my own.
Uh-huh.
And in that sense, I am disappointed in myself that I allowed that to happen, but I'm not ashamed that I have this trait. Um,
There's
it
nothing to
was
be
more
ashamed of.
so of I kind of allowed him to come back into my life and throw his issues on me. And I remember I was in like a real deep depression for like 2 or 3 weeks just because I was taking on everything he was going through. It
Yeah.
had absolutely nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
and and the way that he kind of threw it on my lap was kind of like was also had a lot to do with it, because it was like everything kind of hit like a ton of bricks at once. And
Yeah.
I was trying to help him in all different aspects of all the things he was going through. And mind you, I was going through stuff myself. He didn't care about what I was going through. He didn't care about what was going on in my life, or
Right.
that I was like stressed out already about grad school, or like anything like that. He was just concerned about wanting to feel loved and needed by me, because he knew that I had this empathetic trait that, you know according to him, women in his past haven't necessarily had, or if they have, they kind of cut it off with him.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
not
just
right.
like a prime example of kind of where I set myself up, because I should have, it was okay for me to listen to his issues, but I didn't need to take them on as my own. And that's where I kind of went too far.
But it's hard when you are, excuse me, an empath in relationships. But I think it's great, excuse me, that this is a topic now that people are talking about, because now we can recognize that, okay, this is a trait I have, and this is, okay, it's good, you know, I can be empathetic towards people, but this is where it can hurt myself, and this is where I need to learn to turn it off when it starts to hurt me.
Yeah.
Because I know even myself, like, that has stopped me from leaving relationships before that I knew I shouldn't have been in, but I've been like, oh, well, you know, if I leave, like, who's he going to have? Or, you know, he's had issues with abandonment in the past, so I need to be the one who doesn't abandon him. And it's like, okay, but look at what's happening to you. Like, you're a mess. You're not the person you're supposed to be while you're in this relationship. And I wasn't thinking that way. So
yeah, you just don't think, like, you literally, and I don't know, I mean, I guess this would be empaths, because I think both of us relate to this, but it's as if you put that other person's issues as a top priority beyond yourself.
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't matter what you're going through. If that person is going through something, it doesn't even have to be worse than or equal to what you're going through. If they're going through anything, it's almost like you take that as a priority over whatever it is you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what I really enjoyed about Derrick Jaxn's video, is he's like, if you're dealing with somebody who truly cares about you, they're not even going to put you in that type of circumstance.
Yeah, I totally
where you
agree.
ever
I
even need to feel like you have to take on their issues, or that they would even feel comfortable taking from you in that space to begin with.
Exactly. And I love that he said that, because that makes a lot of sense. But then it brings up the point, like, how do you find the balance? So let's say for a person who's on the other end, not the empath, but has the problems, how do you find the balance between being able to vent and throwing your problems on somebody to take on along with you?
So what I'll say is, I'm going to use my mother as an example, because I do think that my mom fits the definition of an empath.
Yeah,
and when I call her and I need to just vent, sometimes I have to let her know, like, especially if I know it's something that I'm dealing with, and I just want to get it out, but I don't necessarily want her to go out of her way to help me. I'll vocalize that to her. Like, I'll say, Mom, I literally just need to vent. Like, I don't need you to do anything. I don't need you to, like, go out of your way. I literally just need to vent. And then at the end, if you want to provide some insight, that's great, but I don't need you to do anything beyond that. And I think that helps her a lot, because when I set that boundary, she, like, checks herself. Like, now she kind of puts herself in a zone where she can just listen.
Well, that's good that you say that you start off the conversation that way, because it takes the pressure off of her, I'm sure. Like, okay, like, let me not go into panic mode here.
Yeah.
She just told me she just wants to vent. So, yeah, I think that is a good way.
And I would say, even, like, in dating wise, like, my ex, even though now I would say he's very narcissistic and selfish, when we were dating, he was selfish, but he never, while we were dating, at least, he didn't take advantage of my, like, me being an empath. Like, he didn't want me to go out of my way or make myself uncomfortable in certain circumstances. And I actually learned that from him, because he would say that to me. He'd say, Venice, I know how you are, and I don't want you to, like, go out of your way. I just need to vent to somebody. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then once you say that to me, like, once you say, I just need to vent, I need somebody to just listen to me, then I'm able to just, like, shut everything off and just listen and be that listening ear, and then provide you with insight without necessarily immediately taking it on as my own. But when you just come out and just start talking to me, it's like, it almost makes me feel like I'm obligated to fix it.
Yeah, same. No, I take that on, and I definitely like to be a listening ear, and I feel like people use me as that a lot, which I don't mind. Like, people like that are close to me
I
and
do.
Stuff. yeah, but like you and even like family, and I don't mind it. But it is, I find myself having to check myself, like, not to distance myself from people's issue, but just to know they're not even asking me to, like, stay up all night worrying about this. they like that they can just talk sometimes, you know what I mean? They just like to be able to get stuff out. But do you think that I wonder if men are there men empaths as well, or is that more of like
Absolutely.
a woman trait?
Absolutely. I think there are. And I think a lot of male empaths get taken advantage of by women who
Yeah.
aren't as like caring or emotionally sound or whatever
Uh-huh.
terminology you want to use towards those women. But I definitely believe that there are male empaths. I personally feel like I know a few. Never
Yeah.
dated any, but I feel like I know a few.
Uh-huh.
But I do think it's a more feminine trait.
Just to be nurturers and like worry about everybody and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
But
the
I
other
could think
thing
of men too that do it. Yeah.
The other thing too is it might be just more socially acceptable for women to be empaths. So for all we know, more, and I would love to actually talk to a man about this. We might have to bring one on, even one that we
Yeah.
can think of that we think might define himself as an empath. But like,
Uh-huh.
how do you work through dating as a man as an empath? Because being an empath as a woman is almost expected, but being
Right.
an empath as a man, I don't know how that would go.
Yeah, that is really interesting. It's a whole nother like side of
Like,
the issue.
because
Yeah.
honestly, it might actually be worse being an empath as a man. Because
Yeah, because
that's a very feminine trait.
and men are already like expected to be, I guess, like traditionally like protectors, providers, all that. But then when you add the empath side into it, like does that go into double time for them? Do they go out of their way trying
Mm.
to prove that, that they are what you consider like a man or whatever, and they can take everything on? And then, who do they vent to? Because
I was going to say that. Who do they vent to?
we do need to talk to a man who considers himself an
I
empath.
know, like I'm really invested in this now. Like I need to talk to a male. If anybody knows any male empaths that you think would be a good episode for Sip and Spill,
Send them our way.
email us at sipandspills, sipandspills because I really, really want to know that now from the male perspective. Now that's like boggling my mind. Because as
Yeah.
women, I mean, granted, don't get me wrong, women definitely have it difficult in this society, especially Black women. I'm not going to go through a rant on that because that's not what this podcast is about. But I will say that sometimes as women, when it comes to emotional issues, we aren't as open to the male side of things because society has taught us that it's okay to be emotional as a woman, but not necessarily as much as a man. And so it's
That's
like,
true.
wow, like I really want to hear that now.
That is
Because
true. And
imagine, Amber, what if like some empath males try to like talk to us, but we were turned off by their like sensitivity or, just different things? No, seriously,
yeah.
because I feel like that's possible. Like there could have been a guy who tried to talk to you or talk to me or, each of us had our own situation, but we didn't give him the time of day because we thought he might be too sensitive or too this or too that type of
Yeah.
thing, or he wasn't like manly enough or masculine enough of the way that we, like to see. Because I know my dad is a manly man. So it's like when I date, I mean, typically, a daughter dates similar to her father, whether she wants to or not. And I've just had to
Yeah.
come to the conclusion of that. Like, my
Yeah, that's
husband
true.
is just going to be my version of Tony Penn. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's just what it's going to have to be. But but I wouldn't consider my dad an empath, So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that is very true. We could have come across men that just happen to be empaths, and it's nothing wrong with it, but we could have taken it as just because of the way we're trained to think in society, like, oh, too sensitive or whatever. There's nothing wrong with having, like, men have feelings. There's nothing wrong with them having that. And I do think society should get to a place where men can feel more comfortable, like, embracing their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think it is kind of unhealthy to always you have to have somebody that you cannot be okay with. You have
Right.
to have everybody, men included, have to have somebody that they can go to when they're not okay.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know that
That's
is hard.
actually another podcast I want to do, and we can do that another time. But kind of just talking to men about who do you vent to, like whether you're in or out of a relationship, like.
Yeah.
But that's topic for another day. Back to empaths. So one thing I was going to ask you earlier was when, because you were talking about how people feel comfortable venting to you, and people also feel very comfortable venting to me as well, so I can relate to that. But when you vent to people, like, do you feel a sense of guilt at times because you are an empath?
I do.
I
and
do
now that
too.
you say that, I find myself even like as I'm doing it, I'll be like, but it's cool, and like letting them know, like, okay, like you don't need to worry, but I'm just letting you know this or whatever. And sometimes I even find myself just not doing it because I feel like, why would I don't want to bring anybody down with this or whatever, I'll just like sort it out on my own. But that's based off of the way I take things as an empath.
No,
what about you?
I'm exactly the same way. Like, typically, like, even you can probably attest to this. Like, most of the time when I'm venting to you is related to some dating situation that I'm in. But like, and those type of things aren't that valuable and important to me. And that's why I think I'm more open to venting about them, even though I'm very picky of who I vent to. Like, I only have like a handful of people I can think of off the top of my head who I'm willing to call, like, to vent to. But when it comes to like financial issues or like, like too much with school or just like life or my mental stability or different things of that nature, I like really shut down and don't talk to anybody, just because I don't want to bring that to anybody, because I'm an empath and I know that if somebody brings that to me, it's going to impact me, especially if I care for them. I don't want to do that to somebody else and then have them be impacted because of something I'm going through. So I rarely reach out to people when I'm going through like serious issues.
I feel you. I can be the same way, but now hearing that from like someone else, like hearing that from you, it's like it makes me think about me doing it, because it's like I wouldn't want you to be going through something and feel like you can't talk about it. And I'm sure the people that love me wouldn't want me to be want me doing that either. So it's like it's unhealthy. It's good to vent. It's okay to like talk to people, and it's crazy having this conversation. It makes me think of it like from the other end of things.
Right, because we never have these type of conversations. It's like you call me when you want to talk, I call you when I want to talk, but we never think like, well, how are you doing really? Like, or how, like, what are you keeping away from me? Because if you're like okay with telling me about this, what aren't you telling me, type of thing. And I guess you never think about that because you just kind of like think, oh, whatever, it is what it is. But I think we're both very alike in that space of like, we kind of just shut down when we're going through things. And that's not the best way to handle them. Like, you should have someone who you can just vent to, who will just listen, or if you want them to give insight, they can, or if you just need somebody to just listen to you so you can get it out of your system.
Exactly.
You need that, because if not, you're just going to prolong it within yourself. And I think it's okay to deal with things on your own for a little bit, but you need to get them out.
That's so true.
And for women, we're more open to getting things out. I think both me and you are a little different in that sense. Like, some people would consider me an open book, but what they don't realize is the things I'm open about are things I don't care about.
That's true.
And I think the same with you. Like, I wouldn't say anybody would say you're an open book, but you also don't necessarily talk much about things you truly care about. Whereas a lot of women, or at least from what I observe, more women are more likely to do those type of things. But I am curious to see, that might be our masculine trait. Like, maybe.
Yeah.
Because
I think it is.
When you think about it, like, I really am curious of who do men vent to? Like,
because
like, I know when I'm in a relationship with somebody, it's very important to me that I'm like someone who that person is comfortable talking to about any and everything. And that was something I loved about my last relationship, was that like I felt like I was that person who he could go to about any and every problem. And I tried to make sure I had that comfort space for him, because it is like a thing. Like, black men, and I mean men in general, but I'm just speaking on black men because that's who I relate to the most.
Right.
Black men need somebody to talk to. You know,
They do.
they need somebody to vent to. They need somebody to get through these issues with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like in our culture, like men feel like they have to be the strong ones. And then, you know, they may be looking at this type of thing, like empaths, and feeling like they're taking advantage of empaths. So there's definitely is a balance between venting and taking advantage of an empath. Like you can vent.
I never thought of that. Do you think, just to piggyback off of your point, sorry, but I just thought that was a really good point, so I wanted to point it out. Do you think maybe it's a misconception? Like maybe part of the reason men aren't as vocal or open to us is because they don't want to put their pain and hurt on us?
That could be. Yeah, I think it could be that, and they just don't want to be looked at as weak. Like they want us to look at them like our strong support system or whatever. You could be strong and still, everybody has problems, so it's okay to vent those out. I think there's a difference between venting and then venting in a manipulative way. That you can talk about your problems, and then you could be like talking about your problems in a way that's always also asking for things, like, you know, I don't know, throwing out like a insinuation that if you had like some money you'd be better or something like that. Or there are manipulative ways to vent, but I don't want this conversation of empaths to stop people from venting though at the same time.
No, I think an empath is a gift.
Yeah,
I know it might be looked at as like being straining or whatever, but I do truly think that it's a gift to be able to put yourself in someone's shoes literally, because when you are able to do that, you're able to provide the best form of help, because you're not thinking it from yourself, you're thinking it from that person's perspective, but you still are able as a third party to provide the correct type of insight or assistance that's needed. So I think that empaths are a gift, but I do think like with Derrick Jaxn, the key thing is making sure that you're setting those boundaries to make sure you're not being taken advantage of.
Exactly.
And I do believe that narcissists feed on empaths the most because they're narcissistic. They're all about themselves. So because they know an empath is going to take on them more than they will for themselves, that's why they feed on them. And that's probably why a lot of narcissists end up with empaths or take advantage or break the hearts of empaths because of that.
Exactly. And you said it, like expecting people to take on things that they don't even want to take on themselves for them. Like that, I feel like that's a key sign that you're dealing with a narcissistic empath, or not empath, a narcissistic person who's taking advantage of your empathy and being an empath. Them expecting you to do things that really they're not even doing for themselves. To be
have sorry, I was going to say, have you like dated someone you would consider a narcissist who fed on you being empathetic? And if you have, what's an example, so that way, like, you know, people are listening to this, they have like an example of like what to notice.
That's a good question. I've been in a relationship where I feel like I got taken advantage of for being an empath, but I more so fault myself. Like I don't think that person ever even like asked or expected me to take on the things that I did. It was just me dealing with a damaged person and then feeling like I had to fix the damage. But I don't feel like it was a situation where they were like narcissistic and trying to take advantage of. But to think of some, I've seen it happen. So to name some traits where people can know the signs, probably like just manipulation, guilt trips, trying to make you feel like, well, if you love them, you know, you would do this or whatever, or maybe reminding you of the things they've done for you or whatever, and why you need to like help them or whatever. What about you? Do you have any key signs?
Sure. I mean, I'll point up some specific examples. So one is like my ex from college. I would say we'll call him. Well, I have him in my phone as the devil on earth, but we'll call him Lucifer. So
Okay.
Lucifer, he would do things like he knew that if he told me he had money issues, I would send him money. And granted, that's my own fault, but at the same time, he knew that I would do that. So it's
Right.
like I do have to blame myself for being open to like sending him money if he said like, "Oh, I can't afford my blah blah blah," or "Oh, I'm going to get kicked out." Da 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 da.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also have to blame him because I know now that I'm like, out of that relationship and I'm older and I'm wiser and I can look back at it, that he was specifically targeting me to vent about those things because he knew that I would fix them.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, is a prime example of a narcissist who is feeding on an empath. And that's an
agree.
example Derrick Jaxn uses in his video as well. Like somebody kind of like saying, "Oh, I can't, afford this," or "Oh, I need money for this." Da 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 da. They know that an empath is going to go out of their way to fix it because they can feel the struggle, and they don't want you to go through that struggle that they feel when you talk about it.
Yeah.
And because I loved him and I was in such a deep love with him, I never wanted him to struggle. And when he would tell me the struggle he was going through, I constantly felt the need to fix it. So I would say that is a very specific example. And that falls into manipulation. I guess I just wanted to give something specific that somebody could take away.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure
that's
that
a
struck with a
prime
lot of
example
people.
of manipulation when somebody vents to you constantly about specific things. And when you offer it, if they don't say, "Oh no, I'll figure it out," it's because they're using you. Like, and don't take that as
Yeah.
like the first time they vent and you fix it, they're using you. But if you notice it's like an ongoing thing, like say they vent to you once, like, "Hey, I'm really struggling with my phone bill this month. Like, this came up, I'm helping my mom with this, da da da." And you're like, "You know what? It's fine. I got extra money, cool." And you give it to them, like that's on you. And I wouldn't necessarily fault that. But if they do it a second, third, fourth, fifth, you know what I'm saying? Like it keeps going, then yeah, they're absolutely feeding on you. That's a fact. They're absolutely feeding on you.
Yeah, I would agree. Because it should get to
Because
a point where they shouldn't even want to talk about that because they know, all right, she's going to feel like she's got to give me this, so let me just figure this out on my own. If they don't want to keep like,
I
if
don't
you
even.
know,
No, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you.
no, I was just saying if they keep, if they see that you help them out the first time and then they continue to complain about money over and over, that is a pretty telltale sign. Yeah, they know you're gonna fix it every time. So I feel like at some point, either stop accepting it if they're gonna vent about their money problems, or talk about it with somebody else who's not gonna feel like they have to give them the money.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, because even like in Derrick Jaxn's example, I don't necessarily have an issue if they vent to me about their money issues. It's just if they're constantly taking from you, like because if somebody truly loves you and cares for you, they don't want to put you in that circumstance where you constantly have to provide for them. Like especially
Yeah.
as a when you're looking at a traditional male sense. Now, the idea
Mm-hmm.
of what a male is supposed to do in a relationship now is a conversation for another day. I know what I'm looking for, and I want my man to provide and protect. That doesn't mean I don't plan on working. That doesn't mean I don't plan on having my own career, my own money. But I still think it's important for a man to provide and protect, and there's different ways to do that. And what I'm saying is like, if he's vented to you like, "Damn, this month has been crazy. Like I've had these bills, these bills, these bills." And then you're like, "Oh, well, I have extra money. I can give it to you," type of thing. And he's like, "No, it's fine. I don't even want to like do that." Then that's fine. Like it's
Yeah.
okay for him to vent to you at that space.
Yeah.
But I will say though, as an empath, you need to understand that it's your obligation to not offer. And that's where I messed up at. And it's like, if somebody is venting to you, you need to take it as that. Like if somebody's telling you, just to keep going with the financial, because that's an easiest example. But if somebody's telling you like, "Man, like my electric bill was double what it usually is, this, blah, 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 that, I had all these expenses, my car got messed up, that. And you're like, "Dang, that's crazy, man. I hope you figure it out." that's what you should reply with. Like, you shouldn't reply with, oh, well, you know, I don't want you struggling and I got this extra. Like, no, that's not your obligation. Like, you should just, you know, be a listening ear.
Yeah, no, I agree. But as an empath, it is natural to feel guilty, or you'll feel like, well,
and that's hard.
Yeah, it is very hard, but it's the right thing to do.
Right.
You don't want to get in a situation where you're being used or manipulated.
Right. But yeah, so we are running out of time. So was there anything else we wanted to add on about empaths and relationships?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
All right, guys, that wraps up this week's episode of Sip and Spill. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star rating.
You can also find us on social media at Sip and Spills. That's SIPANDSPILLS.
And until next time,
I'ma say bye, bye, bye. Better know I won't think twice. Better